Wealthy CEO shocked to see his ex-wife and twins on a park bench, texting for shelter in the cold. What he did next? They erased 6 years of his life. They stole his children. And they did it all while looking him in the eye and pretending to care. Jameson's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Mother, I'd like you to meet someone. Actually, 3 someones. This is Rosalie Brennan. And these," he gestured to the 2 small children holding her hands, "are your grandchildren, River and Autumn. 5 years old. 5 years you've known they existed and said nothing." Patricia's face went white. "Jameson, this isn't the place for family drama. We can discuss this privately." "No," his voice was ice. "We're done with private. We're done with secrets. We're done with you controlling my life." He turned to face the crowd, cameras flashing like lightning. 6 years ago, my mother and uncle threatened the woman I loved. Told her if she didn't disappear, they'd destroy me. Destroy my career, my reputation, everything. She was pregnant. She left to protect me. And I've spent 6 years searching for her while my own family knew exactly where she was and what they'd done. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Patricia's mask finally cracked. "You don't understand what was at stake. She was nobody. A gold digger trying to trap you." Rosalie stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear enough to carry. "I never wanted his money, Mrs. Reed. I only wanted him. But you made sure I understood that loving your son would cost him everything. So I left. I raised our children alone. In poverty. In fear. Because I thought I was protecting him." She looked at Jameson, tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong. I should have trusted that love was stronger than your cruelty. But I was 22 and terrified, and you were very, very convincing." The room exploded. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. And in that moment, everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because this story doesn't start in a ballroom surrounded by Seattle's elite. It starts on a frozen park bench at 2 in the morning, with a woman who, lost everything, and a text message that was never supposed to reach him. It starts with the kind of coincidence that some people call fate and others call a miracle. And it starts with a choice that would either destroy them all or give them everything they never knew they needed. If you believe in second chances, if you've ever wondered whether love really can survive anything, then you need to hear this story. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in the impossible. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to choose between love and survival? Have you ever discovered that the life you thought you knew was built on lies? Because by the end of this story, you're going to understand that sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one. Sometimes rock bottom is the foundation for everything beautiful. And sometimes the family you fight for is worth every single battle. Now let me take you back to where it really began. To a winter night in Seattle that was so cold it felt like the city itself was holding its breath. Seattle's winter didn't arrive gently. It invaded. The rain had turned to sleet somewhere around midnight, and by 2 in the morning, the streets of Pioneer Square wore a skin of ice that made every step treacherous. Wind tunneled between the brick buildings with enough force to steal breath, turning the air into knives that cut through fabric and skin alike. The city was asleep, or pretending to be. But on a wrought iron bench beneath a broken street lamp on 3rd Avenue South, Rosalie Brennan sat perfectly still, her body curved around 2 small forms like a shield against the world. The twins, River and Autumn, barely 5 years old, slept fitfully against her chest. Their faces were buried in the wool coat she'd wrapped around all 3 of them, a coat that had been thick enough last winter but seemed paper thin now. Their breath came in small, visible puffs that disappeared into the darkness. River's breathing had a rattle to it, a wet sound that had been getting worse for the past 3 days. Autumn whimpered in her sleep, her small hand clutching her mother's shirt like a lifeline. Rosalie hadn't slept in 36 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, her body jerked awake with the primal fear that if she slept, something terrible would happen. Someone would take them. They'd freeze. She'd missed the moment when everything fell apart completely. So she stayed awake, her arms tight around her children, watching the occasional car pass without slowing, watching the occasional person hurry by without looking, watching the night stretch on like it might never end. A delivery truck rumbled past, its headlights washing over them for a brief moment before plunging them back into shadow. The driver didn't even glance their way. A woman in expensive boots, the kind that cost more than Rosalie used to make in a month, hurried past on the opposite sidewalk. Her eyes slid over the bench, over the huddled figures, and away, as if looking might obligate her to something she wasn't prepared to give. Rosalie understood. She'd been that woman once, in another lifetime. The woman who walked past problems because she had somewhere to be, someone, waiting, a warm apartment with heat that worked and food in the refrigerator. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost from a past so distant it might have belonged to someone else entirely. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. The battery icon showed 8%, that critical red zone where every moment the screen was lit felt like burning through oxygen you might need later. She'd been rationing the charge all day, turning it off between the hours when Bridget might actually answer, conserving it for this one essential purpose. Asking for help. Pride had a voice, and it had been whispering in her ear for 3 weeks now, since the fire. Since the apartment building she'd been subletting in had gone up in flames at 3 a.m, taking everything they owned except the clothes they'd been sleeping in and the emergency bag she kept by the door. Since the landlord had disappeared, and she'd discovered that her lease had never been legal, that the entire building had been an illegal sublet operation, that she had no renter's insurance because you can't insure what doesn't legally exist. Pride whispered that she should wait until morning, that she could make it through one more night. That asking for help was admitting defeat, was proving everyone who'd ever doubted. Her right was failing her children in ways that would mark them forever. But River coughed, a wet, rattling sound that cut through Pride like a chainsaw through paper. And Autumn shivered, even pressed against her mother's warmth. And suddenly Pride didn't matter anymore. Only survival mattered. Only getting them somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere they could sleep without fear of freezing or worse. Rosalie pulled out her phone, her fingers stiff from cold. Even the simple act of unlocking the screen took 3 tries, her numb fingers refusing to cooperate. She scrolled to the contact list, to the name she'd memorized 6 years ago, back when life still made sense. Back when she'd had friends and a future, and the foolish belief that love could conquer anything. Bridget Quinn, not blood, but closer than anyone who shared her DNA. They'd been roommates in college, had stood up in each other's theoretical weddings, had promised to be there for each other no matter what. Then Rosalie had gotten pregnant and vanished, and maintaining friendships had become a luxury she couldn't afford. But Bridget had tried, had sent messages for 2 years before finally stopping, had left the door open in that last message. If you ever need anything, I'm here. Well, she needed something now. Rosalie typed with stiff, clumsy fingers, each word a small surrender. Bridge, I'm so sorry. Can we crash at your place tonight? The kids are frozen. Just till morning. Please. She hit send, unaware that her numb thumb had slipped on the final digit of Bridget's number, that the 7 had become a 6, that the message that was supposed to go to her last remaining friend had just gone somewhere else entirely, to someone she'd spent 6 years making sure would never find her, to the man whose family had made it very clear that her existence was a problem they knew how to solve, to Jameson Reed, 4 blocks away, in a steel and glass tower that overlooked Elliott Bay like a modern cathedral to commerce and ambition. Jameson Reed stepped out of the executive conference room and into the carpeted silence of the 42nd floor. The late-night negotiation had gone well, better than well. The merger that would triple his company's holdings in the Pacific Northwest was done, signed, sealed, ready to be announced to the board in the morning. It was the kind of victory that should have felt triumphant, the kind of deal his father would have been proud of, back when his father was alive to be proud of anything. Instead, it felt hollow, like eating when you're not hungry, like checking off a box on a list you never wanted to be on in the first place. The building's heating made the air too warm, too still. Jameson loosened his tie, rolling his shoulders against the tension that had taken up permanent residence there. 42 floors below, the city sprawled out in patterns of light and shadow. From up here it looked peaceful, orderly, like a circuit board where everything connected the way it was supposed to, where current flowed along predictable paths to predictable destinations. He knew better. The city was chaos pretending to be order, pain pretending to be fine, people pretending they weren't one disaster away from losing everything. He'd become good at pretending too. His phone buzzed, expecting another message from legal, probably something about disclosure documents or timeline adjustments. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen. The message stopped him cold, stopped his breathing, stopped his heartbeat, stopped time itself. Bridge, I'm so sorry. Can we crash at your place tonight? The kids are frozen, just till morning. Please. Below it, an auto-generated location pin blinked like a heartbeat. Pioneer Square, 3rd Avenue South. Above it, the name. Rosalie. 6 years collapsed into a single, visceral moment. 6 years since she'd vanished from his apartment, from his life, from his future, leaving. Nothing but a note that said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this, please don't look for me." 6 years of private investigators who'd found nothing. 6 years of calling in every favor, checking every lead, searching every database he had access to, legal and otherwise. 6 years of dreaming about what he'd say if he ever saw her again, swinging, wildly between, "I love you," and "How could you," and "Please come back." 6 years. And now this, a message clearly meant for someone else, mentioning kids. His mind raced through the math. 6 years ago, she'd left. No explanation, no trace. If she'd been pregnant, if she'd had a child, if that child was his. Kids, plural. His hands started shaking. The phone felt too light, too fragile, like it might shatter and take this impossible moment with it. He read the message again, then again, making sure it was real, making sure he wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion or wishful thinking or the universe's cruel sense of humor. The location pin blinked. Pioneer Square. 4 blocks away. She was 4 blocks away right now, and she thought she was texting someone named Bridge, which meant she didn't know this. Message had come to him, which meant this was an accident, a mistake, a cosmic glitch. That had just handed him the one thing he'd spent 6 years failing to find. He didn't let himself think. Thinking would mean questions, would mean doubt, would mean hesitation. He pressed the contact for his driver, his voice coming out rougher than he'd heard it in years. "Get the car. Pioneer Square, 3rd Avenue South. Now, sir, it's 2 in the morning. Is everything all right?" "No. Yes. Just get the car." He was moving before the call ended, long strides eating up the hallway, stabbing the elevator button like it had personally offended him. The wait for the elevator felt eternal. 42 floors had never seemed so far. When the doors finally opened in the lobby, he was already pushing past them, past the night security guard whose greeting died at the look on his face. The car pulled up as he hit the sidewalk. He was inside before it fully stopped. The driver, Marcus, had been with him long enough to know when not to ask questions. 3rd Avenue South, Pioneer Square. Fast as you can. The city blurred past the windows. Jameson's mind raced faster. What would he say? What would she say? Would she run? Should he let her? What about the kids? Were they really his? How old were they? Why hadn't she told him? Why had she left? Had his family done something, said something, threatened something? That last thought landed like ice water. His family, his mother specifically, who'd never thought anyone was good enough for her son, who'd made it very clear that Rosalie, with her state school education and her working class background, was absolutely not good enough, who'd smiled to Rosalie's face and said poisonous things when she thought Jameson couldn't hear. Had she done something worse when he wasn't there to hear it all? The car turned onto 3rd Avenue. The street was nearly empty, just shadows and streetlights and the occasional huddled form in doorways. And then, under a broken street lamp, the bench, 3 figures. A woman and 2 small bodies pressed against her like she was the only warm thing in a frozen world. Even from half a block away, even after 6 years, even in the darkness, he knew her. The way she held herself, the angle of her head, the shape of her against the night. "Marcus, pull over. Here, sir. We're not quite to the location. Here, now." The car stopped. Jameson was out before the engine cut, his expensive leather shoes hitting frozen pavement with a sound like a gunshot. The cold hit him like a physical force, stealing his breath. He'd walked from the building to the car, maybe 30 seconds in the open air. These 3 had been out here for how long? His approach must have made some sound, because Rosalie's head came up. Even in the bad light, even across the distance, he saw the moment she recognized him, saw her entire body go rigid, saw her arms tighten around the children in a gesture that was pure instinct, pure protection. He stopped 6 feet away, close enough to see her face clearly, far enough to not crowd her, to not seem like a threat. Though from the way she was looking at him, he was absolutely a threat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sleet fell between them, and 6 years of silence screamed louder than words ever could. "Rosalie." His voice came out softer than he'd intended. Broken. Her jaw tightened. You shouldn't be here. I got your message. He watched her process that, watched confusion cross her face, then understanding, then something that looked like horror. She glanced at her phone, still clutched in one hand, then back at him, then closed her eyes like she could will this moment into not existing. That wasn't meant for you. I'm sorry. Wrong number. We'll be fine. You should go back to whatever meeting you came from. It's 2 a.m, Rosalie, and they're freezing. He let himself look at the children for the first time. Really look. The boy had dark hair, curly like his own. The girl's face, even in sleep, had the same stubborn set to her chin that Rosalie's had. They were small, too small for this, too fragile for the world they'd been born into. We'll manage. We always do. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the exhaustion underneath, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been managing for far too long. Let me help. Just for tonight. No, Rosalie, no. You don't get to just show up and fix this. You don't get to ride in like some kind of hero when you have no idea what we've been through, what I've sacrificed, to keep them safe from your world, from your family, from everything that would destroy them if they knew. The words hit him like bullets. Keep them safe from your family. So it was his family. Something they'd done. Something bad enough that she'd rather live on the streets than risk exposing her children to it. The boy coughed. Not the normal cough of a child with a cold. Something deeper, wetter, more dangerous. The sound cut through Rosalie's defenses like a hot knife. He watched her face crack, just for a second, before she wrestled it back under control. Please. Jameson heard himself begging and didn't care. Just for tonight. Somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. Then I'll disappear if you want. I'll give you money, resources, whatever you need, and I'll walk away. But not like this. Not with them sick and freezing and you so exhausted you can barely stand. I can stand just fine. Rosalie. Please. She held his gaze for what felt like hours. He saw her weighing it. Saw her calculating risks and benefits and worst-case scenarios. Saw her looking at her children, at their small forms, at the way River's breathing rattled in his chest. Saw the moment the mother in her overruled the woman who'd spent 6 years running. Just for tonight. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Just until morning. Then we're gone. Okay, just until morning. He gestured to the car. Marcus had already gotten out and opened the back door, his face carefully neutral in, the way of people who'd been trained not to react to their employer's personal dramas. Rosalie stood slowly, stiffly, her arms still wrapped around the children. The girl stirred, made a small questioning sound. The boy's eyes opened halfway, unfocused with fever and exhaustion. It's okay, baby. Rosalie's voice gentled in a way that made Jameson's chest ache. We're going somewhere warm. Just for tonight. She walked to the car with the careful steps of someone whose body was running on fumes and willpower. Jameson moved to help her, to take one of the children, but she shifted away from his reach. The message was clear. Not yet. Not that. He let her settle into the car first, watched as she arranged the children on. Either side of her, their small bodies immediately pressing into her warmth. Then he slid in across from them, maintaining distance. Marcus closed the door with a soft click, shutting out the sleet and the wind in the frozen street. The heater roared to life, turning the frost on their clothes into dampness. Jameson watched as the warmth hit them, as Rosalie's shoulders finally loosened a fraction. As color started to return to the children's faces, as River's breathing, while still rattling, seemed to come a little easier. The penthouse. Marcus's voice was quiet through the partition. Jameson glanced at Rosalie. She was staring out the window, her jaw set. Please, he said to Marcus. They drove in silence. The city slid past the windows, familiar streets made strange by the hour and the circumstances. Jameson kept his eyes on the road ahead, his grip on the armrest, measured but firm. Every cell in his body wanted to stare at them, to memorize their faces, to calculate their ages and confirm what his mind was already screaming at him. These are your children. These are your children, and she's been raising them alone while you built an empire, and slept in a king-size bed, and never once went hungry or cold or desperate. The guilt was a physical weight on his chest. The tower rose ahead of them, glass and steel reaching into the low clouds. Marcus pulled into the private garage, the security gate recognizing the car and opening without pause. The elevator that opened directly into the penthouse was waiting. Rosalie's eyes widened slightly as they stepped into the elevator. The mirrored walls, the soft lighting, the carpeted floor. This was just the elevator. Wait until she saw the actual apartment. When the doors opened into the foyer, she stopped. Just for a second. The space was all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture and art that cost more than most people's houses. The kind of wealth that didn't shout because it didn't need to. It just was. Guest suite is through here. Jameson kept his voice neutral, professional, like he was showing a colleague to a room, not watching the mother of his children see exactly how far apart their worlds had become. He led them down the hall to the corner suite. It was technically a guest room, but it was larger than most studio apartments. King bed, attached bathroom, sitting area with a sofa and chairs. He opened the door, stepped back. Rosalie carried the girl, Autumn, he reminded himself. Her name is Autumn, to the sofa and set her down with the kind of gentleness that spoke of long practice. The boy, River, walked on his own, but his steps were wobbly. Rosalie crouched immediately, unlacing his boots with quick, efficient movements. Jameson stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure. In his own home, in a room he owned, and he felt like an intruder, like he was watching something private, something sacred, the simple act of a mother caring for her children. There are clean towels in the bathroom. His voice came out too rough. I'll have food sent up. You don't have to do that. He looked at her then. Really looked, at the circles under her eyes, at the way her hands shook slightly, whether from cold or exhaustion or emotion he couldn't tell, at the worn fabric of her coat, the scuffed boots, the careful way she moved like someone who'd learned to make do with pain. I know I don't have to. I want to. Please. She paused, then nodded once, a sharp jerk of her head. Thank you. But just for tonight, he echoed. The words felt like a lie, but he let her have them. He stepped out, closing the door softly behind him, stood in the hallway for a long moment, his forehead pressed against the wall, his breath coming hard, like he'd run a marathon instead of just found everything he'd been looking for 6 years. Then he pulled out his phone and called the building's 24-hour concierge service. I need food sent up. Something warm. Soup, bread, hot chocolate, and make it kid-friendly. 2 children, looked to be about 5 years old. He paused. And add some fruit, whatever looks fresh, and milk. Right away, Mr. Reed. Next call was to his personal physician. Helena, I know it's late. I need a favor. Pediatric consultation, first thing in the morning. No, tonight if possible. I have a child with a respiratory issue that sounds serious. He listened to her questions, gave what answers he could. Thank you. I'll send a car. 20 minutes later, room service knocked softly. Jameson took the card himself, wheeled it to the guest suite door, knocked gently. It's just me. I have food. The door opened a crack. Rosalie's face appeared, guarded. He wheeled the card in, started arranging dishes on the small table. Grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles, tomato soup in ceramic bowls, apple slices fanned out on a plate, and 2 mugs of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and a dusting of cinnamon. The children's eyes went wide. Jameson felt something crack open in his chest at that look, that wonder over something so simple. When was the last time they'd had enough to eat? Eat slowly, Rosalie murmured to them, but her own gaze kept drifting to the windows, to the view of the city spread out 42 floors below. Jameson stood near the kitchenette, pulling out his phone to give himself something to do with his hands. But his attention kept drifting back to them, to the way Rosalie automatically wiped the girl's, Autumn's, chin, to the way she broke the sandwich into smaller pieces for the boy, River, without being asked, to the careful way she rationed the food, making sure the children ate first, taking small bites of her own sandwich only after they'd had their fill. When the children finished, when their stomachs were finally full and the warmth of the room had made their eyes heavy, they curled together on the sofa. Rosalie pulled a blanket over them, her hand lingering on the girl's hair in a gesture so tender it hurt to witness. Jameson had been watching without meaning to. When Rosalie turned and caught him staring, he didn't look away. You can take the bedroom. He gestured to the king bed, still made up with sheets that probably cost more than her last month's rent. It's warmer. We'll stay here. Her voice left no room for argument. He wanted to push, wanted to demand answers to the 1,000 questions burning through him. Instead, he just nodded. There are extra blankets in the closet, and the thermostat is on the wall if you need to adjust it. Thank you. The words sounded forced out, like they cost her something. Rosalie. He paused. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad they're safe. Whatever happened, whatever you're running from, you're safe here tonight. Her eyes met his, and for a second, he saw past the walls, past the defenses, to the woman he'd loved 6 years ago. The woman he'd never stopped loving, if he was honest with himself. Just for tonight, she said again. Like a mantra. Like if she said it enough times, it would become true. Just for tonight. He forced himself to turn, to walk to the door. His hand was on the handle when he heard her whisper. So soft he almost missed it. Good night, Jamie. The old nickname hit him like a fist to the chest. She hadn't called him that since the night before she left. Since the last time they'd lain in bed together, her head on his chest, talking about the future like they had one. He didn't turn around, didn't trust his voice, just stepped into the hall and pulled the door closed behind him. Then he leaned against the wall, slid down until he was sitting on the expensive carpet, and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. The grief, the anger, the desperate, fragile hope, the absolute certainty that everything had just changed and he had no idea if he was ready for it. But ready or not, tomorrow would come, and with it, the answers he'd been searching for. The truth about why she'd left, about the children whose faces looked so much like his own, about what his family had done that was bad enough to make her choose the streets over him. Tomorrow, but tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they were warm and fed and sleeping under his roof. Tonight, for the first time in 6 years, he knew where she was. It would have to be enough. Morning came too early and not early enough. Jameson had been awake since 5, running on coffee and adrenaline, and the kind of nervous energy that made sitting still impossible. He'd spent 3 hours in his office, making calls to people who owed him favors, pulling strings, building a safety net he had no idea if Rosalie would accept. But at 7, he forced himself to stop, to step into the kitchen, to do something normal, something that didn't involve lawyers or private investigators or contingency plans. He made breakfast. It had been years since he'd actually cooked anything. The penthouse had a chef on call, a service that delivered whatever he wanted whenever he wanted it. But this morning, he needed to do something with his hands, something real. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit cut into pieces small enough for children, coffee for himself, and, after a moment's hesitation, for Rosalie. He remembered she took it black, no sugar. Wondered if that had changed. Wondered how many other small things about her had changed in 6 years. He heard them before he saw them. Small footsteps padding down the hallway. A child's voice, high and clear. Mama, where are we? Rosalie's response, too quiet to make out. Then the footsteps grew closer. The boy appeared first in the doorway. River, 5 years old, though he looked smaller. Dark curly hair that stuck up in the back. Eyes that were unmistakably Jameson's own, the same unusual gray-green that his father had called storm eyes. The boy stopped when he saw Jameson, his small body going still in that way children do when they're not sure if they're safe. Good morning. Jameson kept his voice soft, non-threatening. I'm making breakfast. Do you like scrambled eggs? The boy didn't answer, just stared with those familiar eyes until his mother appeared behind him, her hand settling on his shoulder in a gesture that was both protective and reassuring. Rosalie looked like she'd actually slept, though not well. Her hair was damp from a shower, hanging loose around her shoulders. She wore clothes from the wardrobe he'd had stocked in the guest suite, simple but clean. A sweater that was slightly too big, jeans that fit better. She looked more like the woman he remembered, and nothing like her at the same time. Good morning. He repeated the greeting to her, his hand suddenly unsure what to do. I made coffee. Black, no sugar. If you still take it that way. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that he remembered. I do. Thank you. The girl, Autumn, peered around her mother's legs. She had Rosalie's features, delicate and fine-boned, but those same storm eyes. Her hair was lighter than her brother's, brown with hints of gold in the morning light. There's hot chocolate, too, Jameson offered, if they'd prefer that to milk. Can we, Mama? Autumn's voice was soft, hopeful. Rosalie's expression softened in a way that transformed her face. Of course, baby. They moved into the kitchen space slowly, carefully, like deer approaching a clearing they weren't sure was safe. Jameson served plates, poured drinks, tried to make his movements calm and predictable, unthreatening. They ate at the kitchen island, the children between them like a buffer zone. The silence was awkward at first, broken only by the clink of forks on plates. Then River reached for his orange juice and knocked it over, the liquid spreading across the granite in a golden flood. The boy froze, his face going pale. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. The fear in his voice was wrong, all wrong, like he expected punishment for a simple accident. It's okay, buddy. Jameson was already grabbing paper towels, mopping up the spill. It's just juice. Accidents happen. But River was still frozen, his breathing fast and shallow. Rosalie had her hand on his back, murmuring reassurances, but her eyes, when they met Jameson's, were dark with something that looked like shame. It's okay, she was saying. See? It's just juice. No one's angry. You're not in trouble. Slowly, the boy relaxed, accepted the new glass Jameson poured. But the moment had revealed something, some history that made a 5-year-old terrified of spilling juice. Jameson filed it away with all the other questions he didn't know how to ask yet. After breakfast, after the dishes were cleared and the children had wandered to the living room to stare out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city spread below, Rosalie and Jameson stood in the kitchen. The silence between them was heavy with 6 years of unsaid things. I called my doctor, Jameson said. Dr. Helena Park. She's a pediatrician, one of the best in Seattle. She's coming by at 10 to look at River. Rosalie's shoulders stiffened. You didn't have to do that. His cough sounds serious. When was the last time he saw a doctor? She looked away. A while. How long is a while? 3 months, maybe 4. Her voice was tight. Do you have any idea how much a pediatrician visit costs without insurance? Do you know what happens when you can't pay medical bills? They go to collections. Collections affect your credit. Bad credit means you can't rent an apartment, can't get a job, can't do anything except slide further down until you end up exactly where we were last night. The words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking. Jameson felt each one like a blow. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have known. How could you? She turned back to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You were here, in your tower, building your empire. I was in another world entirely. We might as well have been on different planets. I looked for you. His voice came out rougher than he intended. For 2 years, I had investigators searching. I called in every favor, checked every database. You disappeared like you'd never existed. I know. A single tear tracked down her cheek. That was the point. Why? The question he'd been holding back finally broke free. Why did you leave? What happened? What did I do wrong? Rosalie closed her eyes. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid. This conversation, this pain, this, she gestured between them, everything that comes with digging up the past. I have a right to know. If those children are mine, and God, Rosalie, I can see that they are, I have a right to know why you kept them from me. You have no rights. Her voice was sharp as broken glass. You gave those up when your family made it very clear what would happen if I stayed. There it was again. Your family. What did they do? Before she could answer, River appeared in the doorway. Mama, Autumn wants to know if we can go outside. Rosalie's face immediately smoothed into calm. Not right now, sweetheart. It's too cold. But maybe we can find something fun to do inside. There are games in the media room, Jameson offered. And books. And, he hesitated. If you want to watch something, there's every streaming service. Can we watch cartoons? Autumn had joined her brother, her small hand clasping his. Of course you can. Rosalie was already moving toward them, away from the conversation, away from the questions that had no good answers. Let me set it up for you. Jameson watched her go. Watched her settle the children on the massive sectional in the media room. Find an appropriate show. Make sure they were comfortable and safe. Watched her be a mother to children she'd raised alone while he'd been searching in all the wrong places. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Board meeting at noon. Merger announcement. Need you there. He'd forgotten about the board meeting, about the merger, about everything that yesterday had seemed important. He typed back quickly. Cancel it. Reschedule for tomorrow. The response was immediate. Sir, we can't cancel. The press release is scheduled. The board is expecting you. He stared at the message, then at Rosalie, who was walking back toward the kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, despite the penthouse's perfect climate control. Then they'll have to expect me tomorrow. Something came up. Family emergency. He hit send before he could second-guess it, before he could calculate the professional cost of canceling at the last minute. Some things were more important than board meetings. Some things you only got one chance to get right. Dr. Helena Park arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. She was in her 40s with kind eyes and the sort of calm competence that immediately put nervous parents at ease. She'd been Jameson's personal physician for years, had never asked questions about the odd requests, the unusual hours, the occasional need for absolute discretion. She didn't ask questions now, just smiled at River, who was hiding halfway behind his mother. "Hello there. I'm Dr. Park. I hear you've had a cough that won't go away. Can I take a listen to your lungs?" "It's okay, baby." Rosalie crouched to River's level. "Dr. Park is here to help. She's going to make sure you're okay." Slowly, carefully, River nodded, let himself be led to the sofa. Let Dr. Park place the cold stethoscope against his chest and back. "Big breath in for me. That's good. And another." Jameson watched from across the room, his hands in his pockets to keep from reaching out, from trying to comfort a child who didn't know him, who had no reason to trust him. Dr. Park's expression grew more serious as she listened. She checked River's temperature, looked in his throat, asked questions about how long he'd been sick, whether he'd had fever, if he'd been exposed to smoke or mold. Rosalie answered each question, her voice steady, but Jameson could see the fear underneath, could see her hands clasped so tight the knuckles were white. Finally, Dr. Park sat back. "It's bronchitis," she said gently, "possibly bordering on pneumonia. His lungs sound congested, and his breathing is more labored than I'd like." She pulled out her prescription. "Pad. I'm going to start him on antibiotics immediately, and I want him on a nebulizer treatment twice a day for the next week." She looked at Rosalie. "Has he been sleeping outside?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Rosalie's face flushed. "It was temporary. We had an apartment fire. We've been between places." Dr. Park's expression didn't change, but her eyes were kind. "I'm not judging. I'm prescribing. He needs to be somewhere warm and dry. No more exposure to cold or damp. Plenty of fluids. Rest. And if he gets worse, if his fever spikes or his breathing becomes more difficult, I want you to call me immediately. Day or night." She handed the prescriptions to Rosalie. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned to Jameson. "He has your eyes." The words were simple, casual, but they landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Rosalie's face went pale. River looked between them, confused. Autumn, who'd been playing quietly in the corner, looked up with interest. Dr. Park stood, gathering her equipment. "I'll see myself out. Call me if you need anything." When the door closed behind her, the silence in the room was deafening. River broke it. "Mama, what did she mean?" "Nothing, sweetheart." Rosalie's voice was tight. She was just making conversation, but River was 5, not stupid. He looked at Jameson. "Do I have eyes like you?" Jameson's throat closed. He managed a nod. "Why?" And there it was, the question that would change everything, that would open doors that couldn't be closed again, that would force truth into a situation built on 6 years of careful lies. Rosalie was staring at Jameson, her expression pleading. Not yet. Not like this. He wanted to respect that, wanted to give her time to explain in her own way. But he was so tired of secrets, so tired of walls and lies and years of missing pieces. "River," he kept his voice gentle, "can I talk to your mom for a minute? Alone?" River looked to his mother for permission. She nodded, forcing a smile. "Take your sister to the media room, okay? You can watch another show." When the children were gone, when the door was closed and it was just the two of them again, Rosalie spoke first. "You can't tell them. Not yet. They're too young to understand." "Understand what? That they have a father? That I've been here the whole time, 4 blocks from where you were sleeping on a bench, and I had no idea they existed? That's not fair. None of this is fair." His voice rose despite his attempt at control. "It's not fair that you left. It's not fair that I missed 5 years of their lives. It's not fair that my son is terrified of spilling juice and my daughter doesn't know who I am, and you've been struggling alone when I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I was protecting them. From what? From me. From your world. From your family. From everything that would have destroyed them if they'd known." There it was again. "Your family." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. What did they do? Rosalie's composure finally cracked. She sank onto the sofa, her head in her hands. Everything, she whispered. They did everything. And then, finally, she told him. It started the day after I told you I was pregnant. Rosalie's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 6 years. Jameson sat across from her, every muscle in his body tense, listening to words that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about his life. I was so happy, Jamie. So scared, but so happy. We'd only been together 8 months, and I know it wasn't planned, but I thought. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. I thought maybe it would be okay. That we'd figure it out together. I would have. His voice was rough. I would have done anything. I know. That's what made it so hard. She looked up at him, her eyes red. I came to your office to tell you. I had this whole speech planned, but when I got there, your assistant said you were in a meeting with your mother and uncle, said it would be at least an hour, so I waited in the lobby. Jameson remembered that day vaguely. His mother had shown up unannounced, insisting on discussing some foundation business. Gregory had been there too. He'd been annoyed at the interruption, had rushed through the meeting so he could get back to Rosalie, who'd texted that she needed to talk about something important, but he'd never made it back to her. Your mother came out first, Rosalie continued. She saw me waiting, and, I don't know, something about the way I looked must have told her. Maybe I was glowing the way pregnant women supposedly do. Maybe I just looked guilty. But she knew. She stopped, looked at me for a long minute, and then said we needed to talk. Privately. She took me to a restaurant 3 blocks away. Expensive. The kind of place where the waiters know not to interrupt. And she ordered wine for herself and water for me. And then she said, "Congratulations on your pregnancy. I assume you're planning to trap my son with it." Christ. Jameson's hands curled into fists. I tried to tell her it wasn't like that. That I loved you. That we'd figure it out together. She just smiled. That smile she has, the one that doesn't reach her eyes. And she said that love was a sweet idea, but reality was more complicated. That you had responsibilities, a company to run, a legacy to protect. That your trust fund, your position, everything you'd worked for, was contingent on maintaining the family's reputation. She told me about the conditions in your father's will, that if you had any children out of wedlock before you turned 30, your inheritance would revert to the family foundation, that the board would see a pregnant girlfriend as a liability, that they'd remove you as CEO, that everything you'd built would be destroyed. I didn't believe her at first, thought she was just trying to scare me. So I said I'd talk to you, we'd figure it out together, and that's when she stopped being polite. Rosalie's voice had gone flat, emotionless, the way people talk about trauma, when they've told the story enough times that it's lost its sharp edges. She said if I insisted on staying, she'd make sure I regretted it, that she had lawyers who could tie me up in legal battles for years, that she knew people at every major company in Seattle, and one word from her would make sure I never worked again, that she could plant stories in the press about me being a gold digger, a con artist, whatever she wanted, that by the time she was done, no one would believe anything I said. And then your Uncle Gregory joined us, like they'd planned it, probably had. He was worse, so much worse. He didn't threaten. He promised, said if I didn't disappear, he'd fabricate evidence of embezzlement and make sure it pointed to you, that he'd ruin your reputation so thoroughly you'd never recover, that he'd been cleaning up messes for the Reed family for 30 years, and I was just another mess. He put an envelope on the table, $50,000 in a cashier's check, said it was enough to disappear, to start over somewhere else, to take care of the problem if I wanted to. Those were his exact words. Take care of the problem. I looked at that envelope and I thought about you, about everything you'd worked for, about the way your father's death had nearly destroyed you, and how building the company had given you purpose, about how much you loved what you did. And I thought, how could I be the reason you lost it all? So I took the money. Rosalie's voice broke completely. I took it, and I left, and I told myself I was protecting you, that it was the right thing, the noble thing. I wrote you that note. I'm sorry, I can't do this, please don't look for me, and I ran. Where did you go? Portland, first. Found a cheap apartment. Got a job waitressing. The pregnancy was hard. Twins, they told me at the first ultrasound. I was having twins. And I was alone and terrified, and the 50,000 seemed like so much money until I started actually living on it. Rent, food, medical bills. It went faster than I expected. I gave birth at a public hospital. No family with me. No partner. Just me and 2 nurses I'd never met before. They were beautiful, Jamie. So tiny and perfect. River came first, screaming like he was angry at the world. Autumn came 3 minutes later, quiet and watchful. And I held them and thought, I've made a terrible mistake. I should have told you, should have fought for us. But by then, it was too late. I had 2 newborns, and no money, and no way to reach out without risking everything your mother had threatened. So I kept running. Portland, then Eugene, then Sacramento. Always moving, always one step ahead of my own fear. Working whatever jobs I could find. Waitressing, retail, cleaning offices at night, whatever let me keep them fed and clothed and safe. River got sick a lot. Respiratory issues from the start. Premature lungs, they said. He needed treatments, medications, hospital visits I couldn't afford. The medical debt piled up. Collections agencies called constantly. My credit score tanked. Everything got harder. A year ago, I came back to Seattle. Thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe I could reach out to old friends. Find better work. Give the kids some stability. I found an illegal sublet in a building that should have been condemned. The landlord didn't do background checks or credit checks. Just wanted cash. It was a nightmare, but it was ours. And then 3 weeks ago, the building caught fire. Electrical wiring, they said later. We got out with the clothes on our backs and one bag I kept packed for emergencies. Everything else burned. Photos, the kids' baby books, everything. The landlord disappeared. Turns out the whole operation was illegal. No lease meant no renter's insurance claim. No proof we'd ever lived there. We stayed with a friend for a few days, but she has her own problems. Then we tried shelters, but they were full. Winter always fills them up. We slept on a few couches. In my car, until it got towed for expired registration I couldn't afford to renew. And then it was just the bench, and the cold, and River getting sicker, and me knowing I was failing them but having no idea how to fix it. So, I swallowed my pride and texted Bridget, my last hope. And instead, I texted you. The words hung in the air between them. Jameson felt like he'd been punched repeatedly, each revelation a new blow. His mother, his uncle, the people who were supposed to love him, to support him, had destroyed the woman. He loved and stolen his children from him before he even knew they existed. The rage that filled him was cold, calculated, the kind of anger that didn't explode but rather crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. I'm going to destroy them. His voice was calm, too calm. Rosalie looked up sharply. No, that's not why I told you. I told you so you'd understand why I left. Why I can't stay. Why this, she gestured around the penthouse, can never be our world. They threatened you. They threatened me. They've been lying to my face for 6 years while I grieved for you. While you struggled alone. While my children, his voice broke on the word, went hungry and cold and sick. You think I'm going to let that go? I think revenge won't give you back the years you lost. It'll just take more away. This isn't revenge. It's justice. There's a difference, is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like choosing your anger over your children's safety. The Reed family is powerful, Jamie. If you go to war with them, will be collateral damage. The kids will be collateral damage. Is that what you want? Before he could answer, the media room door opened. Autumn appeared, clutching a stuffed elephant Jameson's assistant must have sent over at some point. Mama, I'm hungry. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun. Rosalie's face smoothed into maternal calm, all traces of pain hidden behind a smile. Okay, baby. Let's find you a snack. Jameson watched her go. Watched her lift Autumn onto her hip, even though the girl was probably too big for it. Watched her be strong for her children, even though she'd just relived the worst moments of her life. He pulled out his phone, made a call to his head of security. I need everything you can find on Patricia Reed and Gregory Reed. Financial records, phone records, emails, everything. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care what it costs. I need it by end of day. Sir, that's your mother and uncle. I'm aware. Do it anyway. Next call was to his lawyer, Marissa Grant. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp despite the early hour. "Jameson, what's wrong?" "Everything. I need you to clear your schedule. I'm coming to your office in an hour, and I'm bringing evidence of blackmail, extortion, and conspiracy. Possibly more. How much jail time can someone get for that?" Marissa was silent for a moment. "This is about the woman from last night, isn't it? The one Marcus mentioned. Her name is Rosalie, and those children are mine. My mother and uncle threatened her into leaving 6 years ago. Threatened to destroy my career, fabricate evidence, ruin both our lives if she didn't disappear. She's been raising my children in poverty while I've been here thinking she abandoned me." Another pause. Then, in a voice that was pure steel, "Bring me everything you have. We'll bury them." That afternoon, while Rosalie napped with the children, all three of them exhausted from sleepless nights and emotional upheaval, Jameson sat in Marissa's office surrounded by documents. The evidence was damning. His head of security had worked fast, pulling records that should have been protected but weren't if you knew the right people and had enough money to make them look the way. Emails between Patricia and Gregory discussing the Rosalie problem. Text messages about hiring investigators to track her movements. Financial records showing payments to tabloid journalists, though the stories had apparently never run. Payment to a private investigator who specialized in making people disappear. And then the smoking gun. An email from Gregory to Patricia, dated 3 years ago. Subject line, "Loose end. She's back in Seattle, working at a diner on Capitol Hill. Should we intervene?" Patricia's response, "Not worth the attention. As long as she stays away from Jameson, let her struggle. It's what she deserves." Jameson read the email 3 times. They'd known where she was. For 3 years they'd known, and they'd said nothing. Had watched her struggle. Had watched their grandchildren live in poverty. Had considered it deserved. The rage he felt was beyond words. "This is enough," Marissa said quietly. "This is conspiracy, extortion, harassment. We could press criminal charges. I want more than charges. I want them gone. Out of the company. Out of my life. Out of Seattle, if I can manage it." Marissa studied him. "You're talking about going nuclear. Press charges, and this goes public. Very public. It'll be a media circus. Your family's reputation will be destroyed, but so will your privacy. And Rosalie's. And those children's. They'll be photographed, followed, dissected by strangers on the internet. Are you ready for that?" He thought about River and Autumn, sleeping peacefully in his guest room. Thought about Rosalie, who'd spent 6 years running from attention and scrutiny. Thought about what it would cost them to step into the spotlight. Then he thought about his mother's smile. Gregory's promises. The casual cruelty of people who thought their money and power meant they could destroy lives without consequences. What if we controlled the narrative? He leaned forward. What if we went public first, on our terms, before they could spin it? "You mean a press conference?" "I mean the Reed Foundation Gala. It's in 4 days. 500 guests. Every major media outlet in Seattle. Everyone who matters in this city, all in one place. What if I walked in with Rosalie and the children and told the truth? All of it." Marissa's eyes widened. She paused. "That's incredibly risky. If it backfires, you'll look vindictive, like you're using your children as props. Or I'll look like a father fighting for his family, like a man who refuses to let corrupt people hide behind politeness and social standing. The public loves that narrative, don't they? The devoted father standing up to the cruel family." "They do," Marissa admitted. "But Jameson, you need to think about what this means. You're not just exposing your mother and uncle. You're exposing yourself, your past relationship, the fact that you have children you didn't know about. People will ask questions, ugly questions. They'll question Rosalie's motives. They'll question your judgment. It'll get messy. It's already messy. At least this way, we control how messy. And if Rosalie says no, if she doesn't want to be part of this, then I do it alone. But I'm doing it either way." He returned to the penthouse as the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. Rosalie was in the kitchen, making sandwiches while the twins colored at the counter. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it made his chest ache. "We need to talk." He kept his voice neutral, aware of small ears listening. "After they're in bed." She glanced at him, reading something in his expression. "Okay." Bedtime for River and Autumn was an elaborate ritual he watched from the doorway. Stories, tucked blankets, nightlights adjusted just so. Rosalie moved through it with practiced ease, her voice gentle as she answered their questions. About tomorrow, about whether they could stay in the warm place, about when they had to leave. Soon, she told them. But not yet. For now, we're safe. When their breathing had evened into sleep, when she'd checked on them one last time, she joined him on the balcony. The city stretched out below, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one a story he'd never know. I found evidence. He didn't waste time on preamble. Emails, financial records, communications between my mother and Gregory. Everything you said they did, and worse. They knew where you were 3 years ago, knew and chose to let you struggle because they thought you deserved it. Rosalie's hand went to her mouth. Oh God, I want to press charges, criminal charges, but more than that, I want to expose them, publicly, make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they are. She turned to look at him. And what does that mean for the kids? For me? He laid out the plan. The gala, the public confrontation, the media strategy Marissa was already developing, the risk and the potential reward. When he finished, Rosalie was quiet for a long time. The wind off the bay was cold, carrying the smell of salt and rain. Finally, she spoke. You're asking me to put my children in the spotlight, to make them part of a scandal, to expose them to attention and scrutiny and people saying terrible things about their mother. You're asking me to do the one thing I've spent 6 years trying to avoid. I'm asking you to fight. With me. For us. For them. He moved closer. I know it's risky. I know it's terrifying. But Rosalie, they don't get to win. They don't get to threaten you into silence and then live their comfortable lives like they didn't destroy ours. Someone has to hold them accountable, and it has to be at a gala. In front of 500 people. It can't be a quiet legal battle where my kids don't have to see their grandmother accused of crimes on the evening news. Quiet legal battles take years. They tie up courts. They give powerful people time to hide evidence, to buy silence, to make problems go away. Public exposure is fast. It's decisive, and it makes it very hard for them to make this disappear. She stared out at the city. When she spoke again, her voice was small. I'm scared, Jamie. So am I. But I'm more scared of losing another 6 years. Of River and Autumn growing up thinking their father didn't want them. Of you struggling alone because I was too afraid to fight. She turned to him then. If we do this, if we really do this, I need you to promise me something. The children come first. Not revenge. Not justice. Not exposing your family. The kids. If at any point this becomes too much for them, if they're suffering, we stop. Deal? He nodded. Deal. She took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Then okay, let's burn it all down. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Marissa arrived at the penthouse with media consultants, crisis management experts, and a communications team that treated press releases like military operations. They drafted statements, anticipated questions, prepared responses to every possible angle of attack. Rosalie was media trained in rapid sessions that left her exhausted. How to stand. How to speak, what to say and what to never, ever say. The consultants were kind but firm. This is the biggest story Seattle's seen in years, one of them explained. Every word will be analyzed, every expression, every gesture. You need to be perfect. No pressure, Rosalie muttered. Jameson watched her transform over those 3 days. Watched the woman who'd slept on a bench become someone who could face cameras with calm competence. But in the quiet moments, when the consultants had left and the children were asleep, he saw her hands shake, saw her second-guess every decision, saw her stare at River and Autumn, like she was memorizing them in case it all went wrong. On the morning of the gala, a stylist arrived with clothing. For Rosalie, a midnight blue gown that was elegant without being flashy, expensive without being ostentatious. For the children, outfits that made them look like they belonged at a high society event, but were still comfortable enough for 5-year-olds. Autumn twirled in her dress, the fabric spinning around her like autumn leaves. The girl who'd asked was delighted. I'm pretty, Mama. You're always pretty, baby. But yes, you look like a princess. River was less enthusiastic about his suit. It's itchy. I know, sweetheart. But it's just for tonight. Can you be brave for me? The boy straightened his small shoulders. I can be brave. Jameson watched from the doorway, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. These were his children. His son, who was learning to be brave. his daughter, who loved spinning in pretty dresses. And after tonight, the whole world would know. If you're still watching this story, if you're invested in what happens next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you think Jameson should do. Should he expose his family? Should he protect his children's privacy? What would you do in his position? And subscribe, because the next part of this story is going to absolutely blow your mind. The confrontation that's coming, the truth that's about to explode into the open. It's the kind of justice you don't see often enough in real life. So, stay with me. Stay with this family, because they need you to witness what comes next. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel glittered like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors and gilded columns. 500 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos filled the grand ballroom, their conversations a low hum of power and privilege. The Reed Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, the place where Seattle's elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their charitable giving while drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's weekly grocery budget. Patricia Reed stood near the silent auction, resplendent in silver and diamonds, accepting compliments with practiced grace. Gregory was across the room, talking to board members, his laugh carrying over the crowd. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. Jameson arrived alone as planned. He made his way through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on the merger that had closed last week, playing the role of devoted son and successful CEO. Let them think tonight was just another gala, just another opportunity to network and be seen. At exactly 9 o'clock, the ballroom doors opened again. The crowd didn't go silent all at once. It was more like a wave, starting from the entrance and rolling outward as people recognized Rosalie Brennan walking in wearing a midnight blue gown that made her look like she'd stepped out of a dream. Her hair was swept up, her makeup subtle but perfect. She looked like she belonged in this world, even though both she and Jameson knew she'd never wanted any part of it. On either side of her, holding her hands, walked River and Autumn. The boy wore a tiny suit, his curly hair finely tamed. The girl wore a dress the color of autumn leaves, her face bright with wonder at the glittering ballroom. They looked up at the chandeliers, the flowers, the impossible luxury of it all with the unfiltered amazement of children. And as people began to recognize Jameson, began to look at the children more closely, began to notice the unmistakable resemblance, the wave of silence became complete. Patricia Reed's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips. Jameson crossed the ballroom floor, his eyes never leaving Rosalie's. The crowd parted for him automatically, creating a pathway between them. When he reached her, he offered his arm. She took it, her hand only slightly trembling. Together, they walked toward his mother. The click of Rosalie's heels on marble was the only sound in the cavernous room. 500 people holding their breath, sensing drama, smelling blood in the water. Camera phones were already out, recording, broadcasting to social media in real time. Jameson stopped 6 feet from his mother, close enough to see her face clearly, far enough that the crowd could witness everything. "Mother," his voice was steady, carrying across the silent ballroom. "I'd like you to meet someone. Actually, 3 someones. This is Rosalie Brennan, and these," he gestured to River and Autumn, who pressed closer to their mother's legs, "are your grandchildren. River and Autumn Reed, 5 years old." Patricia's mask of polite surprise was perfect. Almost. Only the muscle ticking in her jaw betrayed her. "Jameson, what a lovely surprise. You didn't mention you were bringing guests, didn't I? How forgetful of me." He kept his tone pleasant, conversational. "But then, memory seems to be a problem in our family. You don't remember threatening Rosalie 6 years ago, do you? Telling her to disappear or you'd destroy my career. Offering her money to, what was Gregory's phrase, take care of the problem." The crowd gasped. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Patricia's face went pale beneath her professional makeup. "Jameson, this is hardly the place for family drama. We can discuss this privately." "No." The word was soft, but absolute. "We're done with private. We're done with secrets. We're done with you controlling my life." He turned to address the crowd directly, his voice rising. 6 years ago, my mother and Uncle Gregory threatened the woman I loved. Told her if she didn't disappear, they'd destroy me. Destroy my career, my reputation, fabricate evidence of crimes I didn't commit. Whatever it took to make her go away. Why? Because she was pregnant. Because she didn't come from the right family. Because she wasn't good enough for a Reed. He paused, letting the words sink in. She was 22 years old and terrified, and they gave her $50,000 and told her to disappear. So she did. She left to protect me. And I've spent 6 years searching for her, grieving for her, while my own family knew exactly what they'd done and said nothing. He turned back to Patricia. You sat across from me at Sunday dinners. You consoled me when I was heartbroken. You helped me throw myself into work to forget. And the whole time, you knew. You knew where she was. You knew she was pregnant with my children. And you chose to let her struggle, to let my children live in poverty, because you thought she deserved it. That's not true. Patricia's voice was sharp, defensive. You don't understand what was at stake. She was trying to trap you. I was protecting you. Rosalie stepped forward. Her voice was quieter than Jameson's, but somehow carried further. I never wanted his money, Mrs. Reed. I only wanted him. But you made sure I understood that loving your son would cost him everything. So I left. I raised our children alone, in poverty, in fear. I worked 3 jobs, lived in apartments that should have been condemned, went without food so they could eat. All because I thought I was protecting him from you. She looked at Jameson, tears streaming down her face that she made no attempt to hide. I was wrong. I should have trusted that love was stronger than your cruelty. I should have believed that the man I loved would fight for us instead of letting your threats scare me into running. But I was young and alone, and you were very, very convincing when you described all the ways you could destroy our lives. The crowd was absolutely riveted. This was better than any reality show. Real pain, real emotion, real consequences playing out in real time. Gregory Reed pushed through the crowd, his hand extended in a placating gesture. Now, Jameson, let's not be hasty. If there were misunderstandings in the past, I'm sure we can resolve them quietly. There's no need to air family business in public. Misunderstandings? Jameson's laugh was sharp. You told her you'd been cleaning up messes for the Reed family for 30 years, and she was just another mess. You put an envelope on the table with a check and told her to take care of the problem. Those were your exact words, weren't they? Take care of the problem. My children were a problem to you. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few buttons. The screen set up around the ballroom for the Foundation's presentation flickered to life. Email threads appeared. Text messages. Financial records. Every piece of evidence Marissa and his security team had compiled, displayed for 500 witnesses to see. This is an email from Gregory to my mother, dated 3 years ago. He read aloud. She's back in Seattle, working at a diner on Capitol Hill. Should we intervene? My mother's response, not worth the attention. As long as she stays away from Jameson, let her struggle. It's what she deserves. He looked around the ballroom, at the board members, the foundation donors, the society reporters. You all know my family. You know our reputation for philanthropy, for helping those less fortunate. And here's proof that my mother and uncle knew where my children were, knew they were living in poverty, and chose to let them suffer because they thought their mother deserved it. 5-year-old children punished for the crime of being born to the wrong woman. What kind of people does that make them? What kind of charity, what kind of compassion, what kind of humanity allows you to watch your own grandchildren go hungry and cold and sick and call it deserved? The room erupted. Voices shouting questions, cameras flashing, reporters pushing forward. Patricia stood frozen, her mask finally shattered, her face a mixture of rage and horror. Gregory had gone pale, his eyes darting toward the exits like he was calculating escape routes. Jameson held up a hand. The crowd quieted, hungry for more. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because people like my mother and uncle, people with money and power and connections, they count on silence. They count on victims being too scared or too ashamed to speak up. They count on their reputation protecting them from consequences. Well, not anymore. I'm pressing criminal charges, extortion, conspiracy, harassment, whatever my lawyers can make stick, and I'm removing both of them from any position of authority in Reed Industries and the Reed Foundation, effective immediately. He turned to Rosalie, took her hand. Most importantly, I'm acknowledging my children, River and Autumn Reed, my son and daughter, who I should have been there for from the beginning, who I will be there for every day going forward, no matter what it costs me professionally or personally or financially. He looked down at the twins who were pressed against their mother, confused by the attention but safe in her presence. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were born. I'm sorry I missed your first steps and your first words and 5 years of bedtime stories. I'm sorry you had to be cold and hungry and scared when I had more than enough to make sure you never felt any of those things. That wasn't your mother's fault. It wasn't even really my fault. It was theirs." He gestured to Patricia and Gregory. They made a choice to put family reputation above human decency, to protect money above protecting children. And tonight, I'm making a choice too. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing your mother. I'm choosing truth over comfort and justice over family loyalty. The crowd was going insane. Applause from some corners, gasps from others. Reporters shouting questions that overlapped into incomprehensibility. Patricia tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out that could possibly counter what had just been revealed. Gregory made his move then, started pushing toward the exit, clearly hoping to escape before this got worse. But Jameson had anticipated that. The ballroom doors opened. 2 police officers stepped in, followed by Marissa Grant carrying a folder thick with legal documents. "Gregory Reed?" The lead officer's voice cut through the chaos. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and criminal harassment." Gregory's face went from pale to gray. "This is a mistake. I haven't done anything wrong." The officer began reading him his rights while the crowd watched, transfixed. This was better than any theater production. This was real-life consequences for real-life villains, playing out like a movie. Patricia stood alone now, her allies melting away. The crowd giving her a wide berth like proximity might be contaminating. She looked at Jameson with an expression he'd never seen before. Not anger, not even hatred. Something closer to incomprehension. Like she genuinely couldn't understand how this had happened. How the son she'd controlled for 35 years had finally slipped her grasp. "You'll regret this." Her voice was low, venomous. "You think you've won, but you've just destroyed yourself. No one will ever trust you again. You'll be known as the man who betrayed his own mother. No." Jameson's voice was calm. "I'll be known as the man who chose his children over his mother's cruelty. And between the 2 of us, I'm comfortable with how history will remember me. How about you?" He turned away from her then, turned toward Rosalie and River and Autumn, toward the future instead of the past, offered his hand to River, who looked up at his mother for permission. "It's okay, baby." Rosalie's voice was gentle. "He's your father. You can trust him." Slowly, carefully, River's small hand slipped into Jameson's larger one. The touch was electric. 5 years of missed connection condensing into a single moment of skin on skin, father and son, finally meeting. Autumn took his other hand, and together, the 4 of them walked toward the exit, through the crowd, that parted like water, past the cameras that would ensure this moment, lived forever on the internet, past Patricia standing alone in her silver, gown like a queen whose kingdom had just dissolved around her. Behind them, chaos. Reporters mobbing Patricia and Gregory, police escorting Gregory out in handcuffs, board members huddling in urgent conversations, the Reed Foundation Gala, descending into the scandal of the decade. Ahead of them, the unknown, but they were facing it together. The car was waiting outside, Marcus holding the door with an expression that might have been approval. They slid inside, the doors closing on the shouts and camera flashes. The quiet was shocking after the ballroom's chaos. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then River, in his small, serious voice, asked, "Are we in trouble?" Rosalie laughed, a sound somewhere between tears and relief. "No, baby. We're not in trouble. We're finally free." The media explosion was instantaneous and overwhelming. By the time they reached the penthouse, #ReedFamilyScandal was trending nationwide. Video clips from the gala had been shared millions of times. News sites were running breathless coverage. Social media had divided into camps, some supporting Jameson's public confrontation, others condemning it as a publicity stunt. But the overwhelming majority of comments were supportive. Stories poured in from people who'd been threatened by powerful families, from single parents who'd struggled alone, from children who'd grown up without fathers. The narrative that emerged wasn't scandal. It was justice. A man standing up for his family, a woman surviving impossible circumstances, children who deserved better, finally getting it. Jameson's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Board members, lawyers, reporters, PR teams. He ignored them all. Tomorrow he'd deal with the fallout. Tomorrow he'd manage the crisis and handle the legal proceedings and figure. out how to navigate being one of the most talked about people in the country. Tonight, he ordered pizza, helped River and Autumn out of their fancy clothes into comfortable pajamas, watched a cartoon movie whose plot he couldn't follow, but whose songs the twins sang along with perfectly, did the dishes while Rosalie put them to bed, her voice drifting down the hall in familiar lullabies. When she emerged, she found him on the balcony again. Their spot, apparently. The place where hard conversations happened. You did it. She joined him at the railing. You actually did it. We did it, he corrected. You were the one who had to stand there and tell your story to 500 strangers. That took more courage than anything I did. I threw up twice before we left. Did you know that? In the bathroom while the stylist was doing my hair. Pure terror. You didn't show it. Years of practice. When you're poor, you learn to hide everything. Fear, pain, desperation. Because the moment people see it, they either pity you or exploit you. Sometimes both. You never have to hide again. He turned to face her fully. Whatever happens next, however messy this gets, you don't have to pretend anymore. She looked up at him, this woman who'd survived 6 years alone, who'd protected their children at the cost of everything, who'd been brave enough to show up tonight even though every instinct screamed at her to run. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be part of your world. How to let River and Autumn be part of it. How to trust that it won't all fall apart again. Then we figure it out together, one day at a time. One crisis at a time. One moment at a time. What if I'm not good at it? What if I embarrass you? Rosalie. He took her hands. You could never embarrass me. You're the woman who survived everything my family threw at you and came out stronger. You're the mother who chose your children's safety over your own comfort. You're the person who taught River to be brave in Autumn, to find joy even in the hardest circumstances. How could I ever be anything but proud to have you in my life? The tears that fell then were different from the ones in the ballroom. Not performance, not strategy, just honest emotion between two people who'd found their way back to each other through the worst kind of circumstances. He kissed her then. Not the desperate kiss of the balcony before, but something softer. A promise instead of a question. A beginning instead of an ending. When they broke apart, she was smiling. So, what happens now? Now, he considered. Now the hard part starts. Legal battles, media management, figuring out custody and co-parenting and whether we're together or just raising kids together or something in between. That does sound hard. Or, he pulled her closer. We skip the hard definitions and just see what happens. Let it be messy and complicated and undefined for a while. Let ourselves figure out what we are without pressure or expectations or timelines. I think I'd like that. She leaned her head against his chest. Messy and complicated sounds perfect. They stood like that for a long time, watching the city lights blur and sharpen through the glass. Somewhere out there, Patricia Reed was dealing with the destruction of her reputation. Gregory Reed was sitting in a police station. The Reed Foundation was in chaos. The company's stock was probably fluctuating wildly based on CEO scandal speculation. But up here, 42 floors above the mess, there was just this. 2 people and 2 sleeping children. A family that had been torn apart and was slowly, carefully beginning to heal. The next morning brought consequences. The Reed Industries Board called an emergency meeting. Jameson attended via video conference, Marissa by his side, ready to battle. But the battle never came. The board, having seen the public response, having calculated the PR nightmare of siding against a father fighting for his children, voted unanimously to support him. Patricia and Gregory were removed from all positions. Jameson's role as CEO was reaffirmed. It was, Marissa said afterwards, the easiest board meeting she'd ever attended. Turns out, threatening grandchildren is bad for business. Who knew? The legal proceedings against Patricia and Gregory moved forward. Criminal charges for Gregory. Civil suits from Rosalie for the years of harassment. Other victims coming forward with their own stories, emboldened by the Reed family's public fall from grace. It would take months to resolve, maybe years. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The evidence was too clear. The public sentiment too strong. Justice, slow and imperfect as it was, would be served. Through it all, life continued. River started at a good school, his respiratory issues finally properly treated. Autumn discovered a love of piano, her small fingers picking out melodies with surprising skill. Rosalie took the position at the Reed Foundation, working on affordable housing. initiatives that would give other families the stability hers had lacked, and Jameson learned to be a father. It wasn't easy. He missed cues, made mistakes, didn't always know the right thing to say or do, but he showed up. Every morning, every night, every moment they needed him. 6 months after the gala, on a summer evening when the city was golden with late sun, they returned to Pioneer Square, to the bench where it had all changed, where a desperate text to the wrong number had rewritten all their futures. The bench was still there, weathered, ordinary, extraordinary. They sat together, all 4 of them, watching people pass. River pointed out dogs. Autumn counted buses. Rosalie's hand found Jameson's, their fingers intertwining with the ease of practice. "This is where you found us." River's voice was matter of fact, the way 5-year-olds state truths without understanding their weight. "This is where I found everything," Jameson corrected gently. "Were you scared?" Autumn asked. "When you saw us?" "Terrified," he admitted, "but also the happiest I'd been in 6 years. Why? Because I didn't even know I was looking for you, didn't know you existed. And suddenly there you were, and everything that had been broken had a chance to be fixed." Rosalie leaned her head on his shoulder. "Some things stay broken," she said quietly. "Some scars don't heal. We're never getting back those 6 years." "No," he agreed. "But we have all the years ahead. That has to count for something. It counts for everything." And as they sat there, this family built from trauma and choice and the strange mathematics of a mistyped number, people walked past. Some recognized them from the news coverage that still popped up occasionally. Some were just strangers moving through their own complicated lives. No one stopped. No one stared. They were just another family on a bench in the city. Ordinary, unremarkable, perfect. If you've made it this far in this story, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this journey from a frozen bench to a future full of possibility. Thank you for believing that wrong numbers can lead to right places, that love can survive cruelty, that families can be built from broken pieces and still be whole. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in second chances. Drop a comment sharing your own story of finding hope in unexpected places. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late for truth, for justice, for love. Because here's what I want you to take away from Jameson and Rosalie's story. Life doesn't always give you fairy tale endings. Sometimes the happy ending is just survival, just making it through to the other side, just choosing to be brave when every instinct says to run. Sometimes a miracle isn't the rescue, it's the courage to ask for help, the strength to tell the truth, the decision to fight for what matters, even when the odds seem impossible. Rosalie spent 6 years running from a family that wanted to erase her. She raised 2 children in poverty, in fear, in conditions no parent should have to endure. And she survived. Not perfectly, not without scars, but she survived, and she kept her children safe. And when the moment came to step into the spotlight and risk everything, she was brave enough to do it. Jameson spent 6 years searching for a woman he thought had abandoned him, built an empire to fill the void she left. And when he finally found her, when he learned the truth about what his family had done, he made the hardest choice of his life. He chose justice over comfort, truth over family loyalty, his children over everything else. That's the lesson here. Not that love conquers all, not that everything works out in the end, but that the people we choose to be in our hardest moments define us more than the circumstances we're born into. Patricia and Gregory Reed were born into privilege, had every advantage, every opportunity, and they chose cruelty, chose power over compassion, chose reputation over humanity. Rosalie was born into nothing, had no advantages, no safety net, and she chose love, chose sacrifice, chose her children's well-being over her own comfort. Who you are isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with it, how you treat people when you have power over them, how you survive when you have nothing left but will and hope. This story started with a text message, a finger too numb from cold to hit the right number, a message that went to the wrong person at exactly the right time. Some people would call that coincidence. Others would call it fate. I think it's something simpler. I think it's proof that sometimes our mistakes, our accidents, our moments of desperation, they lead us exactly where we need to be. Rosalie thought she was texting her last hope for shelter. Instead, she texted the father of her children, the man who'd been searching for her, the one person who had the resources and the motivation and the love to change everything. Was it an accident? Or was it the universe finally giving them the chance they'd been denied 6 years ago? I don't know, but I know that bench in Pioneer Square, that cold Seattle night, that mistyped number, they saved 3 lives. Maybe 4. They brought a family together. They exposed cruelty that had been hidden too long. They proved that even in our darkest moments, hope is possible. So here's my challenge to you. Think about the benches in your own life, the moments of desperation, the times you almost gave up, the accidents that changed everything. Maybe they weren't accidents at all. Maybe they were exactly what needed to happen to get you where you needed to be. And if you're on a bench right now, if you're cold and scared and desperate, and thinking about sending that message asking for help, send it. Maybe it'll go to the right person. Maybe it'll go to the wrong person who turns out to be exactly right. But send it. Be brave. Ask for help. Tell the truth. Fight for what matters. Because 6 years from now, when you're sitting on that same bench with the people you love, with the life you fought for, with the future you almost didn't believe in, you'll be glad you did. Thank you for being part of this story. Thank you for believing with me that love and justice and truth still matter in a world that sometimes makes them feel impossible. Subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips for more stories that will remind you why fighting for what matters is always worth it. Share this video, comment below, and remember, sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one. Sometimes rock bottom is the foundation for everything beautiful. And sometimes the family you fight for is worth every single battle. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Keep fighting for truth. Keep choosing love over fear, because that's how we change the world, one brave choice at a time.